Before millions of eyes, Jasmine Crockett ripped apart the Trump myth, unmasking Ivanka, not as a daughter, but as the shield for corruption, while billion-dollar deals and hidden accounts exploded into the open, putting a dynasty of brand on trial and raising one question: will truth finally bring it crashing down? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The hearing chamber overflowed, every seat filled, cameras blinking red as millions tuned in live. The American flag loomed over the committee, its shadow falling on the bold title, Corporate Transparency and National Security. Reporters whispered, pens scratched, but everyone knew this was no routine session. The stage was set for a clash that could shake the nation. The doors burst open, Donald Trump marched in. He flashed a cocky grin, waving at loyal allies like a king entering his court. His chin was high, his steps heavy, his eyes scanning the room as if daring anyone to challenge him. The swagger was thick, the arrogance undeniable. Across the chamber, Jasmine Crockett sat rigid. Her face gave nothing away, but her hands rested on a worn brown folder. Ordinary in appearance, it pulsed with secrets sharp enough to gut an empire. When the gavel struck, silence dropped like a blade. The gavel struck hard, echoing like thunder across the chamber. Silence fell, cameras zoomed, and every eye turned to Jasmine Crockett. The chairman's voice carried, "Ms. Crockett, you may proceed." She rose slowly, never breaking her stare at Donald Trump. Her voice cut through the still air, steady and unflinching. "Mr. Trump, you have repeatedly declared that Ivanka had no involvement in domestic real estate deals. But here I hold documents that prove otherwise." The words landed heavy, and the room braced for impact. With deliberate precision, Jasmine lifted a thick contract into view. The cover page read in bold, Royal Liberty Tower, New York. Value $620. The cameras clicked furiously as she flipped the pages, then held them high so the committee could see. Page 1, she announced Ivanka Trump's signature. She paused, letting the name hang in the air. Then she turned to the final page. Page last, Donald J. Trump co-signing as financial guarantor. Gasps rippled through the crowd, aides whispering as if history had just cracked open. Trump slammed the table with his palm, the sound sharp and violent. His voice rose into a furious shout. "Fake, this is fake. I never signed that paper. This is a forgery meant to smear me." His face reddened, his body leaning forward like a predator cornered. He spun toward his Republican allies, seated nearby, jabbing a finger in the air. "You see, this is nothing but a political show trial." The rage in his voice bounced off the marble walls, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She stood calm, her grip on the folder, tight eyes still locked on him. Without a word, Jasmine lifted her hand and gave a subtle signal. The lights dimmed slightly and the massive screen behind the chairman flickered to life. A high-resolution photo appeared, the launch ceremony of the Royal Liberty Tower project. The image was clear as daylight, Ivanka seated at the signing table, pen in hand, while Donald Trump stood just behind her. His hand gripped his own pen, leaning forward, scribbling his signature on the same stack of documents. Surrounding them were senior bank executives and legal advisors, their faces frozen mid-smile. The flash of cameras in the photo mirrored the flashes, now blinding the chamber. Trump's fury erupted hotter, louder. "That photo is staged. I only signed as a keepsake. We sign thousands of things every day. Don't twist this into a crime." He raised his hands theatrically, trying to dismiss the image, but his voice cracked under the strain. His defiance rang hollow against the evidence glowing on the screen. The silence that followed was more damning than the shouting. Every journalist in the room leaned forward, recording every word. Jasmine's response cut like a blade. "If it was a keepsake, Mr. Trump, then explain this. Why does your signature appear in the official filing submitted to the New York City Department of Planning?" Gasps broke out again, sharper this time, like the chamber had been struck twice by lightning. She pulled another sheet from her folder, this one stamped with a bright red official seal. The mics picked up the soft rustle of paper as she placed it on the table, the seal catching the light like fire. The silence grew unbearable. Cameras erupted once more, clicking in a frenzy. Lawmakers bent their heads together, whispering urgently. Aides scribbled notes with trembling pens, some fumbling to keep up. The atmosphere had shifted. What was once Trump's stage now belonged to Jasmine. Trump's chest heaved with each breath, his cheeks flushed, deep crimson, his throat raw from shouting. His armor of bravado was showing cracks and everyone in the room could see it. For the first time in the hearing, the balance tilted. Jasmine Crockett, steady and relentless, had landed the first devastating blow. Trump had been cornered, his denials hanging limp in the air, drowned out by ink signatures and a seal that could not be erased. The first line of defense was shattered, and the battle had only just begun. The chamber still buzzed from the first shock, but Jasmine was not finished. She straightened her notes, her tone sharp and measured, and the silence thickened once more. "We've seen the signatures on the Royal Liberty Tower," she said firmly, "but let's move beyond one building." She reached into the brown folder and pulled out another stack of documents. Here, she declared, holding them high, are loan records from Deutsche Bank New York branch. These records show multiple loans filed under Ivanka Trump's name, with you, Mr. Trump, listed as the guarantor. Gasps rippled through the press seats as she slid the copies toward the clerk. Trump shot to his feet, his chair screeching backward on the floor. His face blazed red. His fists slammed the table. "All big companies borrow money," he shouted, his voice booming and ragged. "This is not a crime. This is dirty politics." His finger jabbed the air toward Jasmine, shaking with fury. Then he spun toward the chairman, voice cracking with anger. "Shut this hearing down right now. I will not be part of this circus another second." The marble walls trembled with his roar, but Jasmine did not flinch. Calmly, almost too calmly, Jasmine lifted one page from the stack. Her eyes locked on Trump, her words sharp and deliberate. "If this is so routine, Mr. Trump, then why do these loan records list the final beneficiary as an account in Florida under the name Atlantic Consulting LLC?" She paused, holding the silence until the weight of her words settled. "And why, sir, was Atlantic Consulting created by your own attorney, Michael Cohen?" With that, she revealed the incorporation papers, the signature of Cohen gleaming under the overhead lights. She held it high for the cameras, then laid it flat on the witness table, letting the image burn into every screen across America. The room erupted like a storm breaking. Lawmakers gasped audibly, their voices rising in chaotic whispers. Reporters banged on laptops, hands flying over keys to capture every second. Photographers surged forward, shutters exploding like gunfire. Trump's face twisted with rage and panic, sweat shining under the cameras. "Witch hunt," he roared again, but the power was gone from his voice. It cracked, stumbled, and fell flat in the charged silence. Jasmine leaned slightly forward, her voice quiet but lethal, a whisper amplified by the weight of the moment. "This is not a witch hunt," she said evenly, her gaze never leaving him. "This is following the money." The words dropped like iron, final and unshakable. The entire room seemed to inhale at once, the drama tightening around Trump like a noose. His earlier bravado looked smaller now, his rage reduced to echoes. And Jasmine, unshaken, stood as the hunter who had found her mark. She widened the battlefield from money to power. Jasmine lifted a new binder and faced the cameras, her voice steady but cutting. "This is not just economics," she said. "This is governance." She held up a printed White House internal schedule from 2018, lines highlighted in yellow. It listed a private meeting Donald Trump and Ivanka Trump with representatives of a major American energy conglomerate. The timestamp sat less than 48 hours before that company secured a massive federal contract. She walked it forward to the clerk, then turned a page so the days could read. Attendees, location, duration, every box filled. Staff initials verified the entry. A clearance note confirmed the session was closed to press. The header carried the Executive Office of the President's seal and an internal routing code used on restricted calendars. Jasmine didn't dramatize. She let the timeline do the talking. "The proximity is not coincidence," she said, each syllable deliberate. "It suggests coordination, access trading at the highest level." A public award notice posted within 2 days matched the timeline exactly. She wasn't done. The screen behind the chairman came alive with a single email pulled from a separate packet. At the top, the sender field displayed Ivanka Trump's official address, the date aligned with the meeting window. Jasmine read it aloud and then let it hang on the screen. "Father will sign off once funds are routed. Brand must be protected." The words hit the chamber like a shock wave, simple, cold, and transactional. On the footer, the thread showed prior internal recipients already looped in. Trump exploded palms, slamming the table so hard the microphones rattled. "I have never seen that email. It is fake. You made it up to bring me down." His voice ricocheted off the marble as he thrust a finger at Jasmine. She is obsessed with me, a political puppet. He looked toward his allies for rescue, but heads dropped. Eyes slid away. The fury filled the room, but it could not erase the lines glowing on the screen. Jasmine stepped to the console and tapped a key. A metadata pane unfolded beside the email server path message, ID Kim's signature, and the originating IP block. This transmission came from Ivanka Trump's official account through a verified audited server, she said, crisp and calm. Headers resolve signatures, validate, and logs match the White House retention system. Then she turned back to Trump, voice low as a blade. Sir, an email can be faked, but metadata doesn't lie. Silence fell like a curtain. For a long second, the only sound was the hum of the cameras. Lenses tightened on Trump's face, catching the sudden drain of color along his jaw. Across the dais, two Republican lawmakers traded uneasy looks, then stared at their notes instead. Another shifted in his chair and shook his head, refusing to meet Trump's gaze. In the hard quiet, the political shield around him thinned thread by thread under the weight of verifiable proof. Stark truth. The silence after the email revelation stretched like a wire, but Jasmine wasted no time. She turned to the clerk and motioned toward the side door. A man in a dark suit stepped forward, his face pale but resolute. Jasmine's voice carried clearly. Mr. Chairman, I call Mr. Alan Whitmore, former chief accountant of the Trump Organization. All eyes locked on him as he adjusted his glasses and took the oath. The tension deepened, reporters leaning forward with pens frozen midair. Alan's voice shook slightly at first, then steadied. Donald Trump gave me direct orders, he said. He told me to split transfers into smaller sums so auditors wouldn't catch them. His exact words were, make it look clean, break it apart, nobody checks the crumbs. Gasps erupted the chamber, filling with a wave of disbelief. He continued firmer now, and on multiple occasions he said, Ivanka will sign instead as long as the public believes it's her project. That was the instruction. The words rang heavy, undeniable, every syllable sinking like stone. Trump exploded from his chair, the microphone squealing under the impact of his hands slamming the table. Traitor, he roared, his voice cracking. Alan Whitmore is a liar. I will sue him for slander. I will ruin him for this. His face was flushed crimson, spittle catching the light as he shouted. The gavel banged for order, but Trump's voice only grew louder until the speakers themselves screeched in protest. The fury filled the room, yet underneath it, there was a faint quiver of desperation. Jasmine struck back with precision. Mr. Trump, she said, her tone slicing through the chaos, you can sue anyone you like, but what you cannot sue is your own signature. With that, she raised another document high. It was the 2017 balance sheet of the Trump Organization. The header crisped the ink, still bold. Right here under the line, prepared and approved, we find this Donald J. Trump. She placed the sheet on the witness table, the cameras zooming in to capture the unmistakable scrawl. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions over each other. Flashes strobed across the marble walls. Lawmakers whispered frantically, aides scribbling in a frenzy. One veteran Republican, his face gray, leaned toward a colleague and muttered under his breath, "He's not getting out of this." The words, though hushed, carried across the microphones and landed like a verdict. Trump's fury now clashed with the suffocating weight of evidence. And Jasmine, unshaken, stood tall as the chamber realized the walls were closing in. The uproar from the balance sheet revelation had barely settled when Jasmine reached for another folder. This one was sealed thick and stamped in red confidential medical records. She lifted it with both hands, her gaze fixed squarely on Trump. Mr. Chairman, she said, her voice cutting through the noise, what I am about to present is not financial, but it goes to the very heart of the deception. She slid the seal open and drew out a notarized affidavit. This is the sworn testimony of Dr. Harold Brenner, a retired obstetrician accompanied by official hospital records. They confirm irregularities in Ivanka Trump's birth and pregnancy records, irregularities consistent with prior testimony that she may not be Mr. Trump's biological daughter. The chamber froze. For a second, no one breathed. Then Trump erupted like a storm. He lunged forward, his hands smashing down on the table so hard a water bottle toppled and burst across the wood. His face flamed, red veins standing out at his temples, his voice ripping through the hall. Enough, you people are insane. This is family. This is off limits. Leave my daughter out of this. The gavel hammered for order, but Trump's roar drowned it out, echoing like thunder in the chamber. Cameras shook as photographers scrambled to capture his fury. Jasmine didn't move. She didn't blink. She let his fury burn itself out, then stepped forward, her voice colder than steel. Mr. Trump, you brought Ivanka into this. You used her name as a shield for dirty money. For you, family is not blood, it's a tool, a brand, nothing more. The words landed heavy, deliberate, each one aimed to pierce the armor of power. She placed the sealed medical folder gently on the table in front of her, not opening it further, just letting the silence swallow the chamber. For the first time, it was Trump who had nothing left to throw. The camera zoomed in. Trump's hands gripped the table edge so tightly his knuckles went bone white. His jaw clenched his chest, heaving eyes blazing with fury, yet offering no rebuttal. He stared at Jasmine as if willing her words to vanish, but they lingered in the air like smoke after fire. Reporters clicked relentlessly, recording every flicker of his rage, every tremor in his grip. One lawmaker bowed his head, eyes shut tight. Another shook his head slowly, disbelief etched on his face. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone in the room. This was no longer about loans contracts or shell corporations. This was a direct strike at the myth of the Trump dynasty itself. The carefully crafted image of father and daughter paraded for decades as proof of loyalty and bloodline, now cracked under the force of sworn testimony in sealed medical files. For the first time, the chamber saw not just a businessman fighting for survival, but a man cornered by the collapse of his own legend. And in that collapse lay the twist that changed everything. Ivanka might not be blood, she might only be a brand. The truth was no longer just about money, but about identity, and the mask was slipping fast. The twist detonated, and the room held its breath. Trump lurched forward, fury boiling over like a breach in a dam. He stabbed a finger at Jasmine and snarled, his voice shredding the microphones. Nobody, clown. You'll regret this. The words ricocheted off marble and metal, a spray of heat and spit. He pounded the table again, a brutal thud that sent pens jumping and papers skittering. Camera lights flared as his face blazed crimson and his jaw flexed like a clenched vice. Jasmine didn't flinch. She sat back, straight, eyes level, and let the noise burn out. Her hands folded on the battered folder as if sealing a lock. When the silence finally fell, she spoke cool and unhurried. The truth doesn't need to shout. It echoes on its own. The understatement landed like a hammer, and even the cameras seemed to blink. The chairman lifted his gavel and brought it down once, twice, 3 times, the sound crisp as a verdict. This committee will open a special investigation based on the evidence presented, he announced, each word ringing across the chamber. A wave of murmurs rolled through the rows, then ebbed under the iron of procedure. Trump stared ahead, chest heaving, the fury still bubbling, but going nowhere. He glanced left and right for a lifeline, and found only stone faces and lowered eyes. The balance had shifted, and everyone knew it. His shoulders sagged, and he sank into his chair, the weight of the lights turning his skin pale and his eyes bloodshot. One hand trembled on the table's edge, the other clenched uselessly around a crushed water bottle. He looked smaller now, swallowed by the very stage he once commanded. Jasmine rose in a single smooth motion and gathered her folder. She stepped into the blaze of cameras, a cold, steady silhouette framed by the flag and the glare. The image said everything words could not, and the room absorbed it in stunned electric quiet. Reporters surged but kept their distance lenses, tracking her like spotlights. Aides froze mid-scribble, as if ink itself had run out of courage. The chairman's gavel rested on the block, his hands still, his eyes set on the evidence that would not be unseen. Trump pressed his palms, flat knuckles bone white, as the last tremor left his jaw. The scene hardened into a tableau, the fallen commander, the unshaken witness, and the nation watching, breath held and unblinking. No one moved. The moment held like a drawn blade. Somewhere a camera operator whispered a countdown, and the red tally light steadied. A page turned in the clerk's binder with a papery hiss. The hum of the air system rose and fell loud as surf in the hush. Footsteps echoed in the corridor beyond the doors, then faded into nothing. Inside time felt pinned to the marble, waiting on the next strike of the gavel. The gavel's shadow stretched across the table, long, dark, and utterly final. Flashbulbs popped, but no one dared breathe. The echoes of the gavel had barely faded when the storm hit the airwaves. Every major network broke into rolling coverage, filling screens with split screens of Trump's trembling hands and Jasmine's unflinching stare. Captions screamed in bold red letters, "Trump trembles and is Ivanka, not his daughter." Anchors spoke with clipped urgency, their voices leaving no room for spin. Newspapers rushed early editions, plastering front pages with images that would define the moment. Push notifications detonated across millions of phones like gunfire in the night. In airports, bars, and living rooms, America was watching the same scene on repeat, the empire cracking in real time. On sidewalks, strangers argued as storefront TVs blared the footage on a loop. Diners buzzed with whispers, coffee mugs suspended mid-air, forks frozen over plates. In group chats, emojis gave way to frantic paragraphs as loyalists confronted a new feeling doubt. A man once idolized as untouchable was suddenly vulnerable, his power stripped away by paper and ink. Talk radio lines jammed with callers, screaming at hosts half in defense, half demanding answers. What does loyalty mean? One voice broke through when the facts won't bend. The question hung like a thundercloud over the nation. Jasmine's name shot up every trending chart, her calm composure replayed endlessly against Trump's volcanic rage. Editorials hailed her as the woman who dared to challenge power, a phrase that spread like wildfire. Yet when she faced the microphones outside the chamber, she offered only one sentence. "The truth is the only hero here." No self-congratulation, no theatrics, just a reminder that documents, signatures, and evidence were the true victors. That restraint hit harder than a victory speech, framing her as the foil to Trump's chaos. The silence between her words carried more authority than any roar could. Inside the Republican Party, the fracture widened into a chasm overnight. Strategists sent memos urging allies to avoid cameras and defer all questions to counsel. Committee chairs canceled appearances, hiding behind vague scheduling conflicts. A congressman known for fiery defenses suddenly went silent online, his feed frozen like a stopped clock. Party whips quietly tallied who would remain loyal and who would run, the loyalist list shrinking by the hour. In private hallways, whispers sharpened, "Distance yourself or drown with him." The fear was no longer about Jasmine's evidence, it was about Trump's shadow collapsing. Markets felt the shock before politicians did. At the opening bell, stocks tied to Trump-branded hotels, licensing and developments plunged. Within hours, analysts spoke of systemic risk and brand contagion, terms usually reserved for recessions. In corporate suites, lawyers briefed boards on exposure liability and the possibility of clawbacks. Banks that once rolled out credit like red carpets began filing reports with the FBI. Compliance officers sharpened old drafts into active subpoenas, their pens colder than any courtroom. By nightfall, investors no longer toasted the Trump name, they whispered about abandoning it. The debate spilled from Wall Street to Main Street, raw and furious. Professors launched viral threads on dynasties, legitimacy, and power built on perception. College debate clubs streamed competitions under the title Blood vs. Brand. At kitchen tables, parents explained that names may open doors but cannot absolve wrongdoing. Teenagers asked blunt questions. Why should the law care about a last-name? Clergy delivered sermons about truth idolatry and the danger of worshiping golden brands, their congregations murmuring in recognition. Across the nation, Americans were asking, is family blood or is it branding? Television producers turned the fallout into spectacle. Jasmine's final line replayed in endless split screens against Trump's blood-red fury, a juxtaposition burned into memory. Editors mapped timelines of shell companies and loans, breaking down complex trails in plain English. Fact-checkers worked overtime debunking noise while letting the sealed documents and official stamps speak for themselves. Clips of Trump gripping the table until his knuckles whitened became the day's defining still shot. Even networks once loyal grew cautious, unwilling to bet their reputations on a man cornered by evidence. The message was unavoidable, paper beats spin. For Jasmine, the spotlight was afire, but she carried it with stillness. Asked if she feared retaliation, she repeated only, "The truth is the only hero." Reporters begged her for more drama, but she handed them dates, seals, codes, nothing else. Her refusal to gloat became its own form of triumph, painting her as the calm to Trump's chaos. Editorials began calling her the woman who did not shout. In that quiet, she carried more weight than 1,000 angry speeches. The nation saw in her what it had not seen in him, composure under fire. Behind the scenes, politics churned like a machine stripped of its oil. Pollsters scrambled, finding disillusion leaking even into Trump's strongest base. Donors whispered about pausing contributions not from conscience, but from calculation. Commentators speculated which Republican would be first to call for a new direction. The party fractured, not along ideology but survival, as if each member carried a stopwatch counting their own distance from collapse. One veteran lawmaker muttered off camera, "The brand's poison now." The phrase leaked, and by dawn it was everywhere. What endured after the shockwaves was not numbers or polls, but a lesson that cut to bone. Families are sacred, but they are not shields. Love is precious, but it is not a loophole. Legacy can inspire, but it cannot legalize. Political dynasties may rise on bloodlines, but brands cannot bleach ledgers. Truth, when it arrives, does not shout, it stands. And the bravest act is not to spin, but to stand beside it. Across homes and headlines, one mantra survived the storm louder than any partisan chant. It wasn't about towers, loans, or contracts. It was about something deeper, older, and more human. Family cannot legalize wrong. Not in business, not in politics, not in America. Under the glare of 1,000 cameras, the aftermath began to move like a tidal wave. Within hours, the Justice Department announced that the federal investigation would be expanded. Subpoenas multiplied. FBI agents walked into offices that once seemed untouchable, and the word asset freeze appeared in black and white legal filings. Bank accounts linked to shell corporations were locked, funds, inaccessible wire transfers halted midstream. For the first time in decades, the empire felt powerless, its reach curtailed not by rivals but by the law itself. The sight of marshals carrying boxes from Trump-branded towers became the new symbol of accountability. The story refused to remain domestic. Global headlines thundered in languages across every continent. The Times of London called it the collapse of a dynasty. Le Monde wrote un scandale qui secoue la démocratie américaine. In Asia, major outlets labeled it the greatest political scandal of the 21st century. News anchors in Berlin, Tokyo, and Buenos Aires replayed Jasmine's calm face against Trump's outburst. Across the world, people saw the same message. Even the most powerful could be brought low by evidence. It was no longer an American story, it was a global cautionary tale. And at the center of it all was Jasmine Crockett. Invitations poured in from universities, civic organizations, and even international conferences. She stood before crowded halls and spoke plainly, "I am not the hero. The truth is the only hero here." Her words echoed through auditoriums, drawing standing ovations. Editorials began calling her the People's Congresswoman, a symbol that ordinary citizens could stand against entrenched power. In a political world addicted to spectacle, her calm defiance became its own revolution. Meanwhile, Donald Trump unraveled in public view. The man who once entered rooms with theatrical swagger now walks surrounded by silence. Allies peeled away, unwilling to stand near him as evidence stacked higher each day. His public appearances grew fewer, his voice hoarse and brittle, when he tried to summon rage. Cameras captured him alone at tables, hands shaking slightly as he shuffled notes no one believed. The transformation was brutal. Arrogance decayed into isolation, and bravado collapsed into quiet dread. The empire that once bore his name began to turn into ruins around him. But beyond the spectacle, the moment carried a deeper message. Power, brand, family, all the illusions Trump had wielded were stripped bare. Without truth, they were only shadows. Jasmine phrased it with simplicity when asked by a reporter, "If it is built on lies, it will fall, no matter how big, no matter how long it takes." The lesson rippled far beyond politics, settling into dinner table conversations and classrooms. The myth of invincibility was shattered, and in its place stood something fragile but stronger: belief in accountability. The world was reminded of an old truth: lies can delay, but they cannot bury forever. For months, witnesses had recanted, paper trails had vanished, and rumors filled the void. Yet persistence cracked through piece by piece until the silence could not hold. Jasmine embodied that persistence. One voice, steady and relentless, had pulled a thread that unspooled a dynasty. One person, a commentator, wrote, dared to stand, and the facade collapsed like glass. The resonance of that image moved far beyond one scandal. It became a rallying cry. The final scene told the story better than any headline. Trump sat hunched at the committee table, his head bowed, his eyes red and vacant. His hand trembled against the polished wood, the microphone before him silent for once. No shouts, no insults, no denial, just silence. Across from him, Jasmine gathered her folder, rose with measured calm, and stepped into the lights. The cameras followed her as she walked toward the doors, the glow washing over her like a mantle. Behind her sat a man broken. Before her stood the symbol of justice unshaken. And that image lingered, more powerful than words. Trump, silent and small, swallowed by shadows he once commanded. Jasmine walking into the light, a reminder that one person's courage can shift the weight of history. The lesson was clear, brutal, and undeniable power. Without truth is only theater, and theater always ends. Justice, though slow, had found its stage, and it had chosen its victor. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.